Bold and beautiful brushworks is something we tend to notice immediately on a painting. It's something that captivates you as a viewer, and it puts you in the artist state of mind as if you are the one moving your brushes across the canvas. It carries energy, emotions, and brings something to life even though it's still in two-dimensional. But when we're working on a painting ourselves, brushstrokes is something we tend to overlook. And especially for beginners, you'll notice that your brushstroke will come out usually repetitive, uninspired, or maybe they're a little bit wobbly, really uptight, and just does not speak confidence. This is, however, not your fault, because brushstroke is something that requires intention and awareness. A beginner can accelerate their learning if they're being more deliberate and intentional about using the brush in a certain way and repeat their effort so that it will burn into their muscle memory quickly and become second nature much faster. There is not a lot of tutorials out there focused on learning the brush strokes. That's why I'm excited today to show you 10 brush strokes that you're probably not used to, but super important to learn, even as a beginner. The first thing I want to emphasize is that you shouldn't be holding your brush so close to the tip, because then you don't have enough maneuverability to be able to have that momentum as compared to if you were to hold it loosely, then you can move your brush more freely. So try to hold it a little bit towards the end of the shaft. The first brush stroke I want to talk about, so instead of usually we hold our brush vertically to the paper, I want you to try holding a brush sideways and just kind of move it, not with the full contact onto the paper. So only part of the hair over here will touch the paper, leaving these beautiful textures and really random brush strokes. So this is perfect for a lot of the foliage, organic shapes, like sky and clouds even. Try to hold your brush almost like parallel to your paper and rotate them to create these more randomized effect where you can really see the movement of the brush. People normally don't think you can paint the clouds wet on dry. With this brush stroke, you can actually create really beautiful cloudy day clouds, soft and frazzled edges, suggesting there are multiple layers of clouds. This also works for a more rigid hair brush, like a bristle synthetic brush, where you can really see the movement and the textures, and is perfect for painting foliage. Now the second and the third brush type I want to talk about, they're simply making straight lines. Either you're making a straight line of consistent pressure, or maybe you use lifting to create a tapered end. Maybe you can start with lower pressure, then increase the pressure towards the end. Now, speed plays a key role in this type of brush strokes, because if you were to try to do it slowly, it is very challenging to keep it straight. Especially if you're trying to hold it really close, then the maneuverability is really low. This is why sometimes we see a lot of times in students' work have like a wobbled line. Here for the horizon line is a good example where you need to drag your brush across quickly while applying the same pressure. But for something that has a skewed perspective, like the road here, it's smart to actually use a decreasing pressure or an increasing pressure. And that movement conveyed by the perspective in the energetic brushstroke, that is going to draw the viewer's attention to the main subjects in the scene. With decreasing pressure and a tapered end, this brushstroke is essential at creating movement of a subject such as waves. And sometimes people think that for wet on wet, they can get away with not paying attention to the brushstrokes. However, in fact, even when the paint is bleeding into the underlayer, the movement of that brushstroke is still visible. So you still need to pay attention even when you're painting onto a wet layer. Before we we continue, I just want to quickly mention that I have a free workbook that will help you practice brushstrokes more intentionally. In it, I have summarized these 10 common brushstrokes and where to apply them with concrete examples. You can follow the instructions in the workbook to get familiarized with these hand motions, as well as maybe printing out the worksheet so that you can use it to remind yourself to be intentional about your brushstrokes next time you work on a painting. So go ahead and grab it by following this link here on screen or in description below. All right, let's continue on with the next brushstroke. Now, the fourth brushstroke is that oftentimes when people thinking about shapes, like a rounded shape that you need to fill in, right? Or maybe something is rounded, but maybe not fully circular, and sometimes have foliage, they have like a taper end. Oftentimes people think that they just need to do it kind of in one motion, and they'll be doing it slowly. And that would just result in a more kind of timid and uptight result, as if you're trying to fill in that shape accurately. Now, one advice for you is start by kind of in the center here, go towards the left first, and then rotate your brush and go towards the right again. So this, you have a clean, sharp line of the rounded object. Okay, to show you again, even though I'm maybe filling in a circular shape, I don't actually have to do it within one loop. I can start with this lower end and just really focus my eye on this outer line. That's the part I want to keep clean. I can even do this. I am rotating the brush so that it has a continuous smooth loop of that curve on the outside. And again, it doesn't have to be a perfect circle, because that actually looks more natural and confident. So a good advice here is always trying to paint that brush stroke before you're actually going in and filling the shape on paper. So practice first, get your momentum going, and then just strike once and do it well for your actual painting. It's also okay to have these two brush strokes not fully connected. Maybe look for a natural stopping point, such as the tip of the lemons here. As long as the sides are smooth and rounded, then these characteristics of these rounded objects will still come through. Now, related to the rounded shape, sometimes we have pointy ends to this rounded object, such as a leaf shape or a teardrop shape. So instead of using full pressure, flick your brush so it has a pointed end. This is super handy for painting leaves, to create that very energetic look for leaves and shadows. Even though it feels there are a lot of details here, but smaller and finer shapes are no different than larger shapes. There's no reason why you would need to be timid just because the shape is smaller. You can still go bold, just use a relatively smaller brush. So this is not strictly a brushstroke. It's actually a really important way or instincts to learn when you're actually switching between the tip and the belly of the brush frequently in order to fill in intricate shapes or to reach certain corners. So if you start with the tip of the brush, you may start with the very thin shape. Imagine you have a building that has a tower. Then you can use the tip really quickly there. Then for the body, maybe you can switch over to more of the belly of it so that you use more pressure and be able to fill in larger shapes quickly. Then maybe you have encountered a second building here. So use this full pressure, the belly of it. Then here, vertical line needs to be a bit more careful. You can also do that. Use the tip of the brush, maybe, to carve out the windows if you have any, and use the belly of the brush to fill in the shape. So here, as I work my way down this building, use the tip of the brush and the straight line method to create a roof line. Then immediately press the belly to cover a large area really quickly. And imagine we need to leave out these windows for their white trim. You can still work quickly by alternating between the fine tip to paint some of the arch shapes while using a full pressure stroke to fill in the areas between the windows so that you also have a straight line for the bottom of the windows. Notice that when I'm almost done here with the fine shapes behind the flowers, I immediately switch over to using the belly of the brush so that I can finish painting this large area quickly. If you don't work quickly and fully utilize the thick part of your brush, your wash will turn out bumpy, uneven, and no longer fresh. Number 6 is the full pressure drag. So that is something that I talked about in the number 5, but it's basically using the full pressure and using the full width or height, I would say, of the brush to create the shape, whether it's vertical or horizontal. This would just create a really sturdy and robust energy for the brush stroke, and it is helpful in some of the organic materials like rocks, waves, and water. It would really be helpful to have some of these edges left out. That is because when you press down the quill brush, you will start utilizing the fibers on its side. So when that happens, it would generally create these beautiful textures that is just different from having more of a flat look versus if you only use the tip of the brush. Notice here I'm using the full pressure to create some straight or short lines, all at different angles for the boulders. They can help you quickly convey there are geometric facets within a larger shape. Same techniques applies to using a stiff-haired brush, especially for adding dark tones with more textures. And notice that you can also change the pressure towards the end, but continue moving on using the full pressure of your brush when you encounter finer shapes. Next brush stroke I want to talk about is the idea of tilting and flicking. So tilt your brush sideways. If you tilt it and then flick down really quick, you will have this really tapered ends, but the top of it will be square. So this is very helpful for architectural or more geometric elements where, say, you don't want to paint a really rigid looking window, just all rectangular from top to bottom. You can actually use this approach to still maintain a straight edge, but the bottom is kind of frazzled so that it suggests the object without spelling it full out. Notice that I'm using this method to paint the columns and the windows of this building here. You can do it sideways or use it to contour geometric shapes. But this technique here I want to show you is basically, think about a deft hand. Think about this very delicate movement. So say if you want to, script out these tree branches, right? Instead of doing it just on the spot, trying to follow this line entirely, look at ways that you can kind of break the line intentionally. So that when you maybe start, you have certain higher pressure and then you can move to thinner pressure and have the pressure being varying because you have this deft hand, right? You're just dancing across the paper. So even some lines being broken is totally beautiful as well. But have some part being, full pressure can be helpful as well. This technique is super handy for depicting tree branches, especially because the tree branches are not always see-through, rather are inundated with tree leaves. However, you can also use this for horizontal shapes, such as the water ripples. Instead of seeing the ripples as these broken lines that's not jointed, you'll be better off to see these as continued curves that are broken in certain parts. And in some cases, you can just go curve around continuously instead of treating them as dashed lines. So we talked about creating straight lines with the quill brush. However, for the stiff hair brush, because they don't hold as much moisture, the technique is slightly different. You just need to be mindful not to use the full force on these brushes and only try to apply half of the pressure so that the paint in your brush can last enough through this long thin line. And the best way to go about this is just take a breath and go for it. If you're trying to go slowly or going back to correct the line, because the shape is so fine, there really is no way to do this again without making it look wobbly or timid. Here I'm adding in some electric post and then using the deft hand method also to draw some wires that connect them. Now the last brush stroke I want to talk about, luckily it's the easiest one. That is the one that we are all used to as the default, which is just dabbing. However, this is really helpful for a certain type of subject. It's more so about needing each dab to be visible. The repeated dabbing here makes sense because they are suggesting the ridges of the waves. Just don't try to dab it too much and connecting it into a bigger shape, because then this shape or subject will be really repetitive. I see people do this a lot when painting trees. So then as a result, your foliage will look kind of very fine detailed, but if all the trees look like this, then the whole painting would not have a visual focus. If you must be dabbing, think about rotating your brush and dabbing towards different direction. And try dabbing with the tip as well as with the belly of the brush so that the finished shape is more vivid and energetic. From today's lesson, we have learned that brushworks requires intention. And the more deliberate you are to learn them and to apply them to your work, the faster it's gonna burn in as your second nature. That's why I recommend beginners not waiting too long before you start paying attention to brushstrokes and to practice them both on the side or intentionally used in an artwork. Doing so will really help you building that habit from day one, and it will have a long-lasting effect to your fulfillment in your art journey. Okay guys, I hope to see you all in our next video.